I am thrilled to have as my second guest, Tina Fegent, who is a marketing procurement consultant with over 25 years experience. And I first met Tina about probably a couple of years ago. We had a few coffees together, didn't we? But the moment that I remember the most was when we were walking into the IPA conference, business conference together.
Yeah.
It was like being with a blooming rock star. Everyone was like, Tina, Tina, Tina. It's like, I said, you are so popular. So she knows everyone in the industry. And a couple of things that stand out for me before I ask her to introduce herself is she has worked both agency and client side. So she's got a really good understanding of, you know, how things work on both sides of the fence, which I think is really insightful for us. The second point is she's very active in the marketing procurement community, and she's real sort of got leadership quality. She's always posting articles. She writes for Campaign magazine, and so she really shares her voice and lends her voice. So she's very inspiring. I've already listened to a couple of podcasts with her before. Super impressive. And yeah, I'm really excited about getting her views on things and just diving into the interview. So Tina, welcome. And perhaps you could spend, that's all right. Perhaps you could spend a couple of minutes just introducing yourself, anything that I've missed.
Thank you. I was honoured to be the second guest on your podcast. So no, thank you for the kind intro. So yeah, I've got sort of over 25 years, actually. I've got 28 years experience, but that makes me sound a bit old if I'm going to 30 years. So yeah, one of the first in marketing procurement when I worked for Cellnet, which I don't know if your listeners will know that is. That's now Telefonica. And I got there and again, for the older generation, I think, oh, I don't know what it is about me today, but the user guides for mobile phones used to be really big and massive. And I got there, and the advertising agency was buying them. I was like, oh, from a procurement point of view, you know, can I look at going and buy them direct? And it's like a 50% saving. So that's why I got into marketing procurement. And at that time, hardly anybody else was looking at marketing procurement globally. I think the guys at Guinness were and NatWest were. So yeah, so I've always been in procurement. Luckily, I first specialised in marketing and then worked for Smith Beecham. So I bought Ribena and vending machines for Lucasade. And then I went to Orange and had a fantastic time there. People still got my Orange number, and I can't bear to move away from the Orange or EE network. And then I went to work for two advertising agencies, Gray and Low, so as a commercial director. So quite an interesting, quite a shock actually, going to work agency side. Never worked so hard in my life, but great insight from the point I was commercial director. And I set up my own consultancy 14 years ago actually, to work actually to begin with for agencies, but it's involved to work more with clients, and that could be CMOs, could be pitches, could be reviewing the whole agency base, mentoring, do a lot of mentoring for marketing procurement people, and actually I do a bit of agency work as well. And obviously you and I have worked recently on a client, so looking at tenders and doing training and stuff like that. I chair the SIPS, our trade body for those that are interested, is called CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement Supply, and I chair the marketing group there, who meet every couple of months. So yeah, so I've been doing it for over 25 years now.
It's so impressive. And I think what we forgot to mention, which I was hoping you would, but you were voted one of the most powerful people in advertising. You were the first marketing procurement person to be voted most powerful by Campaign magazine, right?
Yeah, well, in the Campaign A list, obviously there's quite a few other people in there as well. But yeah, really, I was really touched 2017 to be included in there. I've been there every year since, and I think last year I got a good A rating next to me. So really great from a procurement point of view that the trade press thinks that actually, and as you said, I do spend quite a lot of my time talking about good procurement, and we might get onto sort of where procurement can be improved, but I try and use and be positive about the role of procurement, and also educate clients as well as agencies as to what good procurement looks like. So yeah, no, thank you for that. It was really nice to be in here. So take on it again this year.
Well done, honestly. Before I get on to the questions, there was just something you said there, that you were brought in by a couple of agencies to be commercial director. And just for those maybe agency leaders thinking about, is there a need for a commercial director that has a better understanding of procurement? So can you talk a bit about what your role actually was in that commercial director role?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because actually you've got FDs, and if you've got FDs, why do you then need a commercial person. But I think in my two roles, I just got a different slant. And I think, you know, you are facing procurement more and more as an agency. And I think agency land can be very negative about procurement, you know, because they don't want them there. We got on to talk about the IPA report in one of the questions, but actually that was about engaging with procurement. So I think FDs, rightly or wrongly, haven't always got the relevant experience to know how to work with procurement, are often more internally focused. So I think my roles were both internal and external when I was agency side. And actually I've been surprised how there's still quite a lack of procurement people agency side. Bearing in mind there was me and actually there's another lady, Emma, that's in a snowball brought into A&B. I rarely come across, there's Paul who's at Havas in Australia, but actually you need to have people that understand who they're facing to client side. And I think, you know, it's not just about doing the fees, it's about doing quarterly reviews, quarterly commercial reviews. It's being proactive with your spend. And actually, if you've got a procurement client pushing that sort of stuff, to have someone agency side that is attuned to where procurement's coming from, then I think, and it's a different mindset for finance. So I do think agencies could look to invest in that support. You know, not necessarily a full-time role, but I think increased level of understanding with procurement. And that's what my role was when I was agency side.
It's really interesting you say that, because I've been thinking about this for a long time. Agency leaders who go into a traditional kind of negotiation with procurement, my understanding is procurement people typically are very well versed in negotiation skills. The training is a lot more comprehensive. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, you know, we are trained in procurement. We've all done negotiation training, and agencies often haven't. And it could be little, I mean, we talk about nuggets, things like reading upside down. You know, we might look at someone's notepad and have they got, you know, their rates or must it go lower? I mean, it's a silly little thing, but it's things like that, you know, having time out when you're in negotiation, you know, and you see the agency person getting redder and redder, you know, and we can say, we'll have time out. We could go away and talk about the options. We would have prepared. We would have had 2 or 3 scenarios we've got some terms like BATNA and, you know, and most MDA, most desired offer. We would have worked all that out, and that's why people love the options, because it cuts negotiations. I mean, I hate them basically, marketing, but it does cut a 3-month negotiation process down to like an hour. But yeah, no, I totally agree, Jenny. I think it is an art. It is an art. It's playing a long game. So again, when I was agency side, I would build in some costs to be negotiated out where I knew there was procurement. And agencies don't seem to often do that. It could be senior people. You would put costs to added value. So, you know, agencies might say you've got access to our dispatch management system or our management information system. You know, there is a cost of that of £20,000. Might not be, but it's just learning to play the game from a procurement point of view and negotiation. You know, sometimes we might spend a week preparing for negotiation, role playing, you know, the big ones. And when I was agency side, it was like, all right, we've got the negotiation now, let's go in. And often be one person. You should always have 2 people in negotiation, one talking, one writing down the notes. You should always have what if up your sleeve. You know, what if we do this? They're the best negotiations. And so I do think it is an area that agencies could invest in, definitely.
I think it sounds like it absolutely would be, because the investment that you put into some kind of advice from a procurement specialist would ultimately save you money in the long term, couldn't it? These tiny little things, all of these things add up.
Yes, I mean, yeah, when I work with agencies, sometimes, you know, it's like, okay, they're filling the tender. And often it is, you know, the exam does part A and part B. Agencies are straight on part A, forget about part B. Well, they just haven't read it. You know, it is looking for examples of the current experience in beauty, pharmaceuticals, you know, etc. And they're so keen to do it. And I know some of those documents are really mind-numbing, boring. And I did an article a few weeks ago. I actually said, is there not somewhere where we can centralise a central repository of the last 3 years' accounts, top clients, etc. And actually, I had a call on Thursday with someone who's actually looking at some AI technology to do that. And actually, it was an idea that the DBA had many years ago, Design Business Association. And you just need to get rid of all that turgid stuff. and just concentrate on the interesting stuff, in terms of fees, added value, and the scope, etc. Would be great. So there is an art to managing it, and I think in the enthusiasm in the pitch process, and that always makes me laugh because we call it a tender, but for marketing it's a pitch process. You do get caught up in it, and actually, if you have got one of those really awful, really long-winded questionnaires, you can forget sometimes those points. And I actually worked on a public sector tender a few years ago, and there was incumbent and another agency. Everyone really wanted another agency, and we had to follow the EU regulations. And sadly, what it came down to is when it came to the evaluation, you had to look at the evaluation, and the challenger agency hadn't replicated what they were doing in the face-to-face meetings in the document. So when the people were assessing it, they said they haven't demonstrated that they can do X, they can do Y, and they lost. And actually, it would have really good for this organisation to go with the other agency, and that was an extreme because it's public sector and it has to be done that way. But it's just an example of you've got to answer the exam questions, and it's very easy when you are faced with those big documents not to do it, but you have got to do it, and you've got to have someone who knows. I think like the one you and I worked on, it's just having a different view. Why have they asked that? Things like why they're asking for your tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, why are they asking who your competitors are? That's a bit lazy because they're trying to get inside info. But I think it's just having that insight, isn't it? I think just you're dealing with procurement, which I think in most big organisations, they are dealing with procurement now. You need to have that insight, and if sometimes there are account people that get it, or CEOs that get it. But if not, then maybe just having that level of support that will help you.
Absolutely agree. Just talking about your procurement services at the moment and the types of consultancy pieces that you've been involved with lately. Obviously, we're recording this mid-August 2020. We're in the middle of the pandemic, the COVID-19 situation. We're starting to come out of lockdown, although who knows whether we're going to go back into it. Just curious to know, what have you seen, if anything, of different trends that are happening recently that maybe as a result of the pandemic have caused, I don't know, companies to put a procurement process in place to kind of look at their supplier list?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is that procurement has moved up the supply chain, as it were. So I was interviewing for another conference the head of procurement for M&S, and he was saying, he's now dealing with the C-suite at M&S on a more regular basis because, and I know agencies that listen to this are going to hate it, but it was about cost savings, and it had to be, because you had to cost savings. And for him, obviously the food part carried on. We had to switch the fashion side off. But, I've found that procurement generally, or you talk to colleagues that are in banks and FMCG, they've all been really, really busy because I think it has helped cement their role in that they are a key player. I think before we've always felt, we're a bit like marketing sometimes, we've always got a bit of a chip on our shoulder. You don't often have somebody at a board level. If you're buying indirect procurement is things that are not directly involved in manufacturing. So procurement does be spending direct. So if you work for Diageo, you'd be buying the oats to make the Guinness and the tin cans. Indirect will be marketing, HR, IT services. So obviously marketing tends to sit in indirect procurement. And we're often sometimes not on the board. So I think what's happened coming out of this, from a procurement point of view, is elevated the role. And actually a lot of my procurement clients said they've never been so busy because people are coming to them. There's been the recategorisation of suppliers. Again, the M&S chap was saying that he spent a long time prioritising their suppliers, tier 1, tier 2. And then what happens is there's a level above that for the pandemic that's critical. So, for example, we said pest control. Okay, it's not a marketing example, but actually he would never put them as a tier 1 or a tier 2 supplier. But of course, now, kind of the pandemic, they are now critical. So it's really interesting about how they categorise their suppliers. So I think, it's really been about elevating the status. I think it's made them think about strategic partnerships. When agencies have responded on the whole really well, there's been a few that I've heard that haven't done as great, taking a month or two to bring other clients. But on the whole, agencies, I think, have really stepped in. And again, we use the word partnership. It's a word that procurement we hate and agencies love it. But actually, I think we have seen a lot of partnerships really come to the forefront, where those key strategic relationships with the clients that are continuing to invest or maybe having to cut back, but make the money work a bit harder, because there's no point in going obviously in outdoor cinema when no one was around, I think will really bear fruition, because I think those, we're in the trenches together sort of thing will really help. And obviously pitches, I've been very busy during this period with pitches, doing them virtually online, sitting still for 3 hours is not a forte that I have, but actually it has worked really well. I do think at one stage you do need to have a face-to-face, because marketing, it's a people business, and much as we're all experts at Zoom, etc., and Teams now, I do think you still need that degree of face-to-face. But I think clients have been more available because they're not travelling. They're not spending an hour and a half each way. Often they're on back-to-back Zooms and team calls. But the pitches I've worked with, the clients have been much more open to having more time. A couple of pitches we've had perhaps 2 or 3 tissue meetings where predominantly you would have had one, trying to get everybody involved. It was easy to get that guy from New York to dial in. So it's been, I think it's been positive. Obviously on the negative side, unfortunately, redundancies. And I've got a few sort of CMO clients that are having to look around. Obviously we're hearing about it on the agency side, and as you said, it's mid-August, the furlough scheme is starting to come to an end. We will see redundancies, so that that's sad to see, both client and agency side. But we'll come out of it. We will come out of it whenever, and I think relationships will be stronger and deeper, and we will have different ways of working. However they evolve. I think it'd be great. You just got to try and. It's so hard to say, look at the positives, but just try and work together on something.
You mentioned that agencies have been responding really well in terms of partnering with their clients. Can you give us a couple of examples? Have they been sort of more flexible with payment terms, or I don't know, just stepping up to offer more advice or more direction? What kinds of things have they been doing differently?
Yeah, I think it's all of that. It's it's hard when you've got clients saying, well, look, we're going to spend 5 million on media, but it might be 5, it might be 2.5, it might be 1. So let's go through some more modelling, for example, on the media side. Obviously, with events and experiential, they're completely off the scale at the moment. But I've seen agencies come back and say, actually, we've looked at this technology, we could do this online experience. Or talked to a retail client last week, they actually have done, did an experiential event in King's Cross 2 weeks ago. And their agency, they said, worked so hard to make it work, to make sure all the safety precautions were there. So yeah, I think they've been really proactive. I think they've been sharing information what other clients are doing, because obviously each client has been their own, pardon the pun, bubble. I keep using the word bubble, but I think what's a bank doing versus an FMCG versus manufacturer. So I think they've been really helpful in terms of saying, look, this is what other clients are doing, and then having discussions about what happens with the staff. Because staff did have to be furloughed, so working with the clients on what works best. Some clients obviously have their spend cut, some have carried on spending, some have carried reduced, but they will come back and they will remember the agencies that work with them. So for me, it's always been about proactive. A good agency, a good account person is someone who is proactive, and I think on the whole, it's been really good to see during this pandemic that people have stepped up and said, right, what can we do? Because actually it's better to have that relationship. You're right, there have been some issues about payment terms, but also I've known other clients prioritise payment terms, especially for smaller agencies, to say, look, we realise it's really tricky and it's taken a while for the furlough money to come through. Actually, as opposed to 30 days, let's say they're a good client anyway to begin with. For SMEs, let's do it a bit quicker. So the impression I get, and procurement friends and clients, is on the whole agency has been really responsive.
That's excellent. You mentioned before that one of the key skills for an account manager of the relationship is proactivity. Just sort of expanding on that, do you have any other, given your number of years in the business, what other skills do you think are key for a really good account manager?
I think, being proactive. I think being able to hold senior level discussions. I think for me that's a big crux, and more so we can get onto about the IPA report. But being able to deal with senior people. I think being financially aware. I think that is an area that could be improved in terms of having those. Why are we all doing this? Magical Logic, which is now 15 years ago, said it's about getting profitable ideas that work for both sides. Because at the end of the day, why is a client investing their money in that PR, that digital, that event, because they need to drive predominantly sales, increase their brand image, for example. And an account person who's not even focused on that, well, how can they deliver for the client? So I think it's the senior level, having been able to have that dialogue with senior people, client side. I think being financially aware, and also I think being practical, as we said. I think also management, because I think their role is very much about coordinating the agency's resource, because they know they take the brief, it's then going out and working with the creative, the production, the planners, etc., to deliver what is right for that client. So being able to manage, and obviously sometimes a lot of agencies have project management, but I think being able to coordinate and affect change to deliver for that client is really key. And to have that client top of mind, as well as obviously delivering for the agency as well, because you don't want to deliver for the client at 0% profit, because you want not to deliver for the agency then. So, but it's making sure you can, get the skills of the agency resources to deliver, to match the client's brief on time and in line with the budget as well. And that is a skill. It does take a skill to do that. And I think account management are the right ones, are really, really good. But at the end of the day, the key one for me is being focused on the client's business. That's what is top of their mind.
I'm sure Tim Williams from Ignition Consulting Group. He delivered a report for the AAA, I think. Is it the AAA? 4A's. No, what I say?
Yeah,
that's not the Alcoholics Anonymous. No, not that one. Tim Williams did a report between agencies and clients. It was a huge global study, and it was sponsored by a lot of the marketing bodies globally. But one of the questions was, what are you actually selling, as an agency? And all the answers came back from agencies saying creativity, strategy, people, solutions, da 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 da. And the outcome was, you are selling business outcomes. Just as you said, what are the business outcomes that the client is going to receive as a result of working with you? So I love that you brought up that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, agencies can be focused on awards sometimes, and we don't get started on that too much. But I think exactly that, isn't it? It's just like, okay, everyone likes award-winning work, so it's the right award-winning work. But yeah, it's exactly that. It's like, why is the client spending X amount with you? You have to be focused on that. When I worked agency side, one of the most focused teams in one of the agencies I worked in was the ones that actually had a bonus linked to how the advertising worked every quarter, and they were the most focused ones in terms of, okay, that ad's gone out or whatever, okay, where's the data from yours and where are we? Because they can see what was working. Obviously these days that's a lot easier to do with digital work and stuff like that, but you've got to think, why is the client spending this money with you? It's not a vain project. And I think even more so coming out of this period about the return on investment, and actually saying, look, we just got to, talk to a procurement client, that she works across 5 markets, and she's saying what it's made them review, understand is, right, we're going to spend the money as a whole now. So actually, if France needs upweighting, we will look at that, as opposed to the 5 markets doing their own separate work. So I think there'll be a bigger fight for the money, but I think there'll be more focused activity and making sure the work and the budgets go further than they ever did.
That's a really good point, actually. You mentioned just earlier on about the latest report that came out. So this was a report that's just come out from the IPA, commissioned by the IPA by Hall and Partners, called The Future of Account Management. And there were, for those of you who haven't read it, there were 4 key reasons for that this report was coming out. 1, we're losing talent to tech and management consultancies. 2, the value of account management needs redefining. 3, there's a growing need to collaborate across different agencies. And 4, obviously with the new normal, with COVID and the economic impact, we're having to do more with less. So just curious about your view, Tina, on this point about having to define the value that an account manager brings to clients. Do you think clients see the value in account management?
I think they do. I was quite surprised by that report. I felt it was quite light in places, and I was quite surprised. because, and there was a silly quote from a procurement person about, I don't know what they do. I'd like to know who they interviewed, because I wouldn't mind speaking to that procurement person themselves. But I actually just looked back to the pitches I've done in the last few months to see what percentage of the cost was account management, and it was 20%. So actually, in terms of cost versus creative, which is 50% of the cost, planning and production make up the other four areas. So I think account management has a key role to play. My points is there are too many. In these pitches I said, I went back and had a look, and there were 12 job titles in account management, ranging from chief executive down to account exec. For me, what is the difference between a junior account manager, a senior account manager, and a junior account director? There's no difference. There's absolutely no difference. You do not need 12 roles in account management. So I think they have a great role to play, but I think there needs to be less of them. I think they need to be more senior, and need to be more focused. I mean, the best one is James Murphy, and I've got his number on my mobile phone, and I can have, he is, you see him with clients and he's on it, he knows it, he's in with the C-suite. I mean, okay, he's politics, because of who he is, but he's on it with the clients. But yeah, I can still bring him up and have discussion, about their fees, about the structure of the team, stuff like that, and have a bit of a laugh as well. But you see him interacting with clients, and actually, why do you need? There are other obviously good people he's worked with at other agencies, in case any of them are listening. But we've got him, and support of one or two others. Why do you need 6 different people in account management? Unless I know that the poor account exec on £45 an hour is arranging the meetings and stuff like that, and the client lunches and preps when they all go back into the offices. But I think they have a great role to play. I do think the IP report underplays it. I do think they missed a few bits. Because I think it has a great role to play. I think they need to be more commercially aware. Again, we said the last question about look at the outcomes. I think more focused, and be able to have those senior level discussions.
And asking the right questions, presumably.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things I hadn't realised was that the Chief Brand Officer for P&G, Mark Pritchard, said, I think this was a couple of years ago, that they wanted less account managers for their agencies and more creative. And that and obviously Mother, I think, went to a non-account management, or they use account management slightly differently. So it seems to me that account management generally is in the spotlight right now, isn't it? I'm surprised though, because I think it has a great role to play, and I just wondered what the premise behind the IP. Because obviously, if you look at when they did a study in that, it was end of last year, and I think they do acknowledge that things have changed. But for me, I was quite surprised, because actually I do think I've always felt account management, and I know my counterparts do, has a great role to play. We would just often question, obviously, the number of roles, their rate, obviously, sometimes, do you need so many? More about their value and their contribution, not about their role. And if it's only 20% of the cost, and that's, again, Mark Pritchard, that's why I actually looked it up to say, that those recent pitches I've done, what percentage of the overall fee is account management? And all of them is 20-25%, which I think is about right. Absolutely. Why do you think that agencies put so many levels of account management forward?
It's a common complaint from clients that you go to a meeting and there's 4 from the agency, and they don't want to pay for that. I do hear that more and more. I think from an agency point of view, it's covering everything, isn't it? Covering the account execs, their account manager, the learning, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but the client shouldn't pay for that. It could be, like I said, with negotiation earlier, you need 2 ears, 4 ears, yeah, better than 2 ears. So it could be that as well. They're on the account, they've been paid for, those agencies are lucky enough to have a retainer still, justifying the hours, maybe. So I think on the whole it's good intentions, but in the last few years, I would say clients have started to say, I don't need to fall in a meeting. And I think obviously using things like Zoom and that has probably helped that in a way. But yeah, I mean, I've seen agencies are starting to go deeper. I wonder whether it's 2P sometimes. People say about 2P, you should be 80% of someone's business. So whether that sort of deflate, push down a lot of percentage of roles, I don't know, because also 2P's only been around for a while, hasn't it? So whether it's a training ground, but it's been interesting because you don't have those same levels in the, look at planning, head of planning, you know, junior, senior planner, junior planner, creative, executive creative director, medium, or no, you know, production, the same, you know. So I think it's come out of, we've got that salary. Oh, they're not junior account manager, they're not senior account manager now, junior. So they're giving people pay rises, and I think that's why it's blossomed in terms of the job titles.
I think you're right. I think some agencies use it as, how we're going to have a promotional pathway for you, and we create these different levels so that you feel that you're progressing in your career.
Yeah, I agree.
I see a huge amount of disparity between when I work with different agencies. If you have a title of account director, often for me, it's not consistent. There's no consistency, like you say.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where it falls down on the auction. Sorry, because you know, if you've got an account director, I remember working for a media agency quite a few years ago, literally for a bank, and their argument was, our account director is 5 years more experienced than agencies 1, 2, and 3, and it's a fair point. And that's why I think the auctions are really awful, because you don't account for that. But who is educated in the fact that their account directors are 5 years more experienced than agencies?
Well, I was going to ask you, actually, to that point, do you think agencies that want to put forward during the pitch process their different levels of account management should spend more time helping the client understand the value of each of those levels, or certainly the role of each levels in more detail?
I think it's hard in the pitch process because obviously you're often confronted by the most senior person and probably one other. I've just the pitches I've done recently. But obviously for a large account, you know, so I'm thinking of, you know, an agency that won a pitch recently, and I dealt with the, you know, the number 1 and number 2 in terms of account management, but say there are another 6 people under that. But, you know, what my role is together with the client was to actually suss out, okay, what are those people doing? So, okay, are they managing the social engagement, for example? Are they doing this? So, and that's a process of working together. And I think that's what, when you get a good scope of work and in the pitch process, the clients shared that. In the pitches I've done, I've actually been having commercial discussions before the pitches. So we've had 2 or 3 sort of discussions, or we call negotiations, you know, sort of work, but fair discussions to say, actually, account management, say it's at 35%. Yeah, the other agency is 25. Why do you think that? And they were, based on experience, you know, we think they're going to be digital heavy, so we need to do it. So I think it's both. I mean, someone's got to do a start of 10. So once hopefully is a scope of work from the client, the agency does their initial organisational structure, but then it's not just down to procurement, it's down to the marketing client as well. I think that's sometimes where it falls down, that sometimes procurement are left alone to perhaps look at the commercial side. And actually, before you know it, the client's like, oh, I've got this account people. Well, you didn't have to think about what you should have looked at, you know. So procurement needs to actually engage with their marketing clients, you know, in any pitch process, say, look, this is the structure they're saying, what do you think? And obviously you've got your past agency, you know what you have been paying, the structure of it, you know, whether it was 4 or 6 account people, and you should use that obviously as a benchmark as well. So I think it's just to have that regular dialogue. And then if you've got quarterly commercial reviews, which I'm in favour of, you're then reviewing that to say, okay, the scope, we did have these 5 projects, there were 2 gold, 2 silver, 1 bronze, and we had these 5 people, but actually we're now 5 gold, actually we need to upweight it. So that's what we're thinking in terms of the structure.
That's a really good point, actually. Going back a step to pitching, because obviously we're doing virtual pitching now. You've seen many pitch performances on part of agencies, haven't you, in your time? I'm curious to know, is there anything that account management, where do you see really standout performances from account management? Can you give us a couple of examples of where it really has shone and the client sort of turned around and gone, wow, you know?
I think it's someone who is managing the process, you know, be it face to face, be it online. In the pitch process, the account manager is the one in charge. Not, because I don't agree with having agency CMOs, and to be honest, by the time you get to pitch stage, they normally fade away anyway. You know, they're great for that initial discussion, but I think that's the best example of the ones that I deal with, is someone who is the conductor of the orchestra, is on top of it. You know, they've got the tech set up, you know, they know who's talking on their time in it, for example, who's got what role. who's watching the client. That is key. You know, are they getting bored? Are they getting messages? Are they doing the emails? What are they engaging in? You know, and recently on one of the pitches we did online, the account person was like, okay, stop now. Yeah, it was quite good. He had a picture, I forget what it was now. So it's a pipe or something, and it means like let's have a break. You know, because one of these was, you know, these 3-hour pitches. But okay, what do you think? And he was really good at questioning, saying, what do you think? Where are we? How are we going? And that's quite brave to do during a pitch, because the client is saying, don't like it. You know, you're like, oh no, I've got another 2 hours to go. So it's someone who's in charge, who's managing it, who's really got feet on both camps, or eyes, you know, watching the client, but also making sure the agency are on top of it and keeping to time, because that's my pet hate. You know, be it an hour, be it 3 hours, you know, we're all busy these days, aren't we, online and stuff like that, but making sure everything runs smoothly. Knows the clients as well, has done their research, you know, and I think that's sometimes true of procurement, because, you know, I say to agencies, have you looked up a procurement person on LinkedIn? No. We need to know your audience, you know, and actually, if you know that Johnny, who's at client X, used to work at client Y, bring up your mate at client agency Y and say, look, do you know Johnny? And what do you think? And get the SP on it, and do you know they're allergic to nuts or whatever, you know, and have those much. I think that's what agencies fall down on generally as well, is have that level of engagement with procurement on a par with marketing. And I think in pitches that is often true, that, you know, because sometimes we have to bust our way into a pitch, because, you know, it's often the fun part of the pitch process, and, you know, and obviously we can't score as well as the clients do on the creative strategy, but actually not to have done your research and know the procurement person there, or it's the last slide in the deck, or it's numbers, you know, and that's where they fall down as well. I think it's not addressing procurement in the pitch, and actually, you know, treating procurement as one of the team, and agencies often don't do that, as they might ignore the procurement person totally. And to be fair, some might ask a silly question, but, you know, a good account person will fudge it and like, that's a good question, and even though, you know, they think, oh, what's going on there? But yeah, please don't leave the procurement section to the last slide is the budget slide. You know, make sure you've got 10 minutes in there, whatever the time's allowed for, and that you've had good discussion, and you've engaged them beforehand. Do not leave to the pitch. You know, even if, you know, a lot of agencies say, oh, I don't want to ask about procurement, it's going to scare me. You know, even if they're not in the briefing process, say, have you got procurement? Do we need to engage with them? Get it over and done with. You know, and if they are one of these procurement people, it's all about, you know, the computer says no, and it's all about cost, at least you know that. And actually, because it forms part of your view of the client, because, you know, if procurement shouldn't be the lead, obviously, they should be there to support. But if it is a very cost out driven client, you might not have got that from the marketing people. And actually, if you then meet the procurement person, lead up to a pitch, and you think, okay, we're getting a different message here, then that you can make a call and say, look, we're getting some buyers we don't particularly like, you know, and actually go back to the marketing or the client and say, can we just suss that out? So I think engagement early, as soon as you can, in any pitch process as well.
There's so many good, valuable tips there. Thank you for sharing. Honestly, I think that's like I hope people were taking notes. One of the things that you said earlier on, which I feel quite passionate about, is the role of account management is a lot of the time about picking up on those subtleties of what's happening in a meeting, and knowing when to shut up, when to speak, when to lead, when to step in. So I'm really glad you brought that bit up, because that's the kind of softer element that gets so overlooked and so taken, you know, for granted, or feeling like that's not really important. But for me, I think it's one of the, I suppose throughout my career over 30 years, it's the one thing that I've witnessed time and time again, is where an account manager pays for themselves. You know, it's knowing what to do. It's that having that sensitivity.
Yeah,
so that was a great point.
Thank you. And learn to read upside down.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, read. I'm not being funny.
I've got to work on my skills.
Yeah. It's like, say if there's a scoring sheet, it's like, any agencies listening, I hate you sitting next to me on pitches, but you should try and sit next to me on pitches, because you'll be able to see what I'm writing. And that's why I don't like it. Yeah, and I've written, like, when I go into a pitch and they put the names in places, and I'm like, I'm really not an agency person, because I've got my scoring sheet, I'm doing my notes. Those listeners, I am pretending to scribble on a bit of paper. But yeah, so that's why it's always worth just look at her, because you don't know, a scoring sheet could be there. And I've seen, it's really funny. I did a pitch last year for a client. It was designer and brand pitch, and I was sitting next to, they had a youngish chap who was in their internal design team, and he had the scoring sheet. Now, and he was next to the agency person. I can see the agency person kept looking over. It's like, okay. And I started looking, and this kid, he'd used some really weird language. It was really funny. So
anything you can repeat?
Yeah. Well, no. It said it's a skill. It was a language that he learned at school to pass notes, and he said it come from a mining community. I'm not sure, but it's like all hieroglyphics basically. So an agency person was sitting next to him, and the agency person kept looking at his notes. The kid had written it in his secret language. So basically, the agency person couldn't decipher it, and I thought that was. So I thought I must learn that actually. But yeah, this kid had learned it was a whole different language.
That is genius, absolutely genius. I love
really
it, absolutely love it.
Really funny.
You mentioned earlier on, and this is one of my questions, was I think for a lot of account people, there's a little bit of a, not fear exactly, but wondering how to engage with procurement. And so you mentioned before, make sure you know who they are, connect with them on LinkedIn, find out as much as you can, develop a relationship. Tell us a bit more about that, and where you see the value of account management actually creating relationships with the procurement team.
Yeah, I think it's not like a dog. It's not just in a pitch process. It's for life, and I think that's why I see the biggest fall down for agencies is, and we're part of Spain procurement because they are, everyone is really busy, but they often get involved in the pitch, and then obviously agencies don't often then see them. So my biggest tip for agencies, well, the first one I said, engage them early on, look them up on LinkedIn, let them see you look them up on LinkedIn. You might be getting scored on it. You never know. I'm not saying that you would be, but actually, they look up on LinkedIn. They do. Clients do talk and that sort of thing. Oh, did you get that box of biscuits for the pitch? I didn't to the procurement person. And I know we have an ethics register. We're not allowing desktop biscuits. The desktop. We do miss our biscuits. We miss our biscuits, and we miss our notepads from agency pitches.
Noted.
Yeah. But treat the procurement person within the ethics. Don't send them, iPads with a presentation on, for example. But I think look them up, do as you would with marketing, but probably be a bit more vocal about it. Treat them as an equal throughout any part of the process, because they are as important as the marketing person. And then post-pitch, have a level of engagement with them, and that's where agencies fall down time and time again. And I, for years, have said to any agencies I've worked with, have a procurement club, have a procurement quarterly session. Okay, it could be a bit dangerous to get all your procurement clients in one room every quarter. But you know what? Hardly any of them have done it. And I just think you really miss a trick. Or when in the olden days, when we could go out and go to events and, seminars, when I'm lucky to sort of get invited to them. And, there's been some great ones. I really see a procurement person at it. And I say to the client organizer, account manager, have you invited them? And sometimes they have, sometimes they just haven't. The Christmas party, okay, are we going to be the ones that sort of, how much is that costing? And you have a joke about it, if procurement's here, put the vodka away sort of thing, and that's the sort of thing you do. So I think it's pre-pitch, get an SP on them, linking in with them, have that dialogue. But for me, actually, it's more important post-pitch. The ones where you can be in their mobile phone and they can ring you. Because actually, Johnny could leave the SEO and go to P&G. And actually, that agency was really procurement friendly, weren't they? I've got to really, give them a ring. I need a favour, I just need some rates. And I think agencies have got better at it, definitely. But I think there's still room for improvement. And for me, having that quarterly dialogue and having some, get people, they are really busy, but having something to get them out and say, right, come and understand how we do our process for X, it's invaluable.
I absolutely love that, and that's invaluable for agencies. I think this is great advice. Thank you. I suppose also it's in the agency's interest, isn't it? If they did have those quarterly catch-ups, it's also like a forum to be able to tell them what else is going on with their agency, what other services perhaps they've got. Maybe they've made an acquisition and they have more things to offer.
Yeah, with some of my clients, I do quarterly commercial review program, and we also do agency management program where they score each other as well. But in the quarterly commercials, we've got a fixed agenda, and it's what's new with you and what's new with us. One of my clients has been bought by somebody, talking about that. In the meantime, the agency's actually been merged with another agency. I think you're exactly right, Jenny. In terms of, okay, what's new? Let's look at the scope. Let's look at the results. Okay, what's proactive? So actually, if agencies say, well, actually, do you know, we're in front of a copywriter for 3 months because you need to do this, or what about that? Can we talk about that, or what's coming up? So it just gives you that regular dialogue.
Absolutely. And like you said at the beginning, these people that are now maybe on the C-suite, the chief procurement officers, they're going to know what's going on at the business level, aren't they? So that their whole procurement team are going to be updated on that. So it's a regular forum that agencies can have with their procurement contact to understand what's going on with the business. What are the business challenges? What's important? What are the strategic imperatives this year? And then they can look more forward thinking to think, how are we going to develop our services in order for us to tackle those challenges for the clients? So
yeah, totally agree. But if you don't know, once you're in those meetings, how do you know what's happening with the client? What are their requirements? I mean, it's not about sell, but it is, as we said at the very beginning, about being that strategic partner, trusted advisor. So actually, okay, if you are going to divest or go into this area or do this, actually we might help you and do that. And that's why agencies, when the consultancies start up on our agencies, are worried and moaning about the consultancies coming in. But actually, I don't think they've had the impact people think they have. But two, what they could have been worried about was that those consultancies are very good at doing those C-suite discussions. I think that's where agencies have fallen down. And I've seen it. I have seen it with a big client where the consultancy was brought in to do X, the advertising agency and media agency started inputting into it, and before you know it, the consultancy in a way is representing their work. And actually, the CMO said to the advertising media agency, "You better watch it because they got those board level discussions, and they might just ask you for that image of this or a think piece on that." But they're sort of not as they pass it off as their own, but it's part of it. So whilst I think agencies should not be worried about consultancies because they haven't made the impact that everyone was worried about 18 months, 2 years ago, they are very good at that C-suite, relationship, and agencies do fall down on that the man marking. And I've seen it time, and it's easy to do. You've got a client you've had for 2, 3, 4 years, people move, but it doesn't take much to pick up the phone and get a cup of coffee. Do you want a drink? How are you doing? Can we just put something in the diary? And to have that regular dialogue. And that's what consultants are really good at. Oh, actually, you can help with this. Oh, we're going to expand to the US. Do you know anybody? And being that partner.
again, fantastic advice, great reminder for agency account managers to think about that. I've been talking about this for a long time because obviously that in the landscape, the Accentures of this world are becoming hugely acquisitive, aren't they? They're acquiring the creative arms. So I kind of thought to myself, it's only a matter of time before these highly skilled, more business consultancy type leads in management consultants are going to shine and be able to do the whole spectrum of services, not just business consultancy, but all the way through to creative strategy concepts, and all the tactics that come with it. So, they haven't made the impact that you expected them to, though. That's interesting. Why do you say that?
I've seen it with a couple of clients.
Have you? Can you give us an example?
Well, yeah, I've obviously can't know names, but actually, in terms of presenting in pitches, the overall package, and actually when it's come to it, actually been really hard to fulfil or being cost prohibitive. So don't forget, consultancies are a lot more expensive than agencies. But I do think agencies have reacted. It probably has helped agencies sharpen their pencil a bit in terms of senior people. I think in terms of strategic insight, planning, there's some fantastic plans out there in a lot of the agencies. So I think in a way it's helped. I think it has made agencies step up to the table a bit more. But yeah, I just don't see, I think, somewhere like the States, you sort of look at Accenture, I think, bought Drogify and it's Army. And I think, the fact that, Drogify, their creativity linked with the technology that Accenture and planning had, I could see that working. That's scale, and that's the US market. I haven't seen it work over here. I think agencies are very inward looking. You know, yeah, I just think, well, if you do look at the campaign, trade bags are available, the awards, for example, they're very inward looking. They're very, you know, they like beating themselves up. You know, the IPA paper, you know, is a case in point or whatever. I think sometimes they should be more externally focused. You know, start discussing at the very beginning about what they need to do in terms of focus on the client's requirements. Because you want to know about GSK and their different programs and their office and stuff like that. But agencies do spend a lot of time navel gazing, and I think, you know, having the past, you know, very negative about procurement. Well, actually, why are you focused on being negative and use up all that negative energy when actually use some positive energy and say, right, actually, really get on our nerves. What can we do about it? And the same for the consultant. I think it's, you take it, you know, wouldn't it be nice in the world if not having competition? But that's not life. But, you know, you can't beat them, join them. And I think agencies have. I do think the reason we haven't seen such a big impact over here in the UK is because I think agencies have stepped up as well and thought, oh, good, well, just need to sharpen this and we need to do that, and you know, let's get more at the table with the C-suite. And I have seen that, so that's really good to see.
It's interesting because I think we were at the same conference, the IPA conference, when Lisa Thomas spoke. Do you remember? She's head of brand for Virgin. You know, if ever there was a plum job, it's that one, you know, in terms of role. But she was also, interestingly, she used to work for MC Saatchi as well, I think.
Yeah,
because like you, she's got two sides of the coin. And I just remember that moment when she almost like turned to the audience and she waved her finger, because she's sat in boardrooms now. And she said, we're not talking about creative in boardrooms. We're talking business outcomes and business challenges and business. If you want a seat at the table, you need to speak our language. And so I thought it was brilliant. I've quoted that quote so many times.
That's the role of account management. And that's why the IPA paper, I think, have missed a bit of a trick there in terms of, you know, some of the points they've said in there is, I think exactly, Jenny, you know, that's exactly what Lisa said. So step up, know your numbers, go on some commercial courses, deal with procurement, go on negotiation course. I recently did Mark Ripson's mini MBA.
I listened to that. I heard you say that. How's that going?
It was really good. I did do the exam on Friday because I was so busy. Honestly, I was really busy. But you know, from a procurement point of view, and even I've got 28 years experience, to learn from Mark and understand the strategic side of marketing. So obviously, we see the tactical end, don't we? The 4 Ps: primary and agency to do the price of product, etc. So it's almost like, I think if account people could sharpen that finance, you know, I'm sure a few years ago, James Murphy always said to me, I just tell them to treat the accounts as their own. It's got to be a profit and loss. You know, you need to know what that account's doing. So I think Lisa's exactly, go and spend time with the client, you know, sit in those boardroom meetings, for example. And that's what plays itself to account management. That's exactly what their role is, to translate that back to their organisation, to say, look, they're really sugar because of COVID, because of supply demand. KFC, when they went out on the chicken issue last year, what can we do to help? You know, look how well Mother responded, for example, in terms of their creative work. So that's for me, that's why I think account management has a great role to play. And Yarbu to that procurement person, the IPO reports, I don't know what they do. So I was like, where have you been? Planet Mars or something?
I think you mentioned this at the beginning. You said, I know procurement have a bit of a bad rap sometimes. And I suppose it's you know, comments like that have perhaps been taken out of context or, you know, highlighted in a place where they perhaps shouldn't. That it's a shame, actually, because you're right. And procurement are the ones that understand that commercial side of the business, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think this is really valuable for agency account managers to hear. I really do, because you're absolutely spot on. I mean, do you have any other advice other than the stuff that you've mentioned already about, you know, talking strategy, thinking about the commercials, the business acumen that you need to acquire, perhaps looking at one of those, you know, the Mark Ritson, do you recommend the MBA? Is it mini MBA?
Mini MBA marketing, very good from a marketing point of view, but obviously not money wise. I mean, apart from segmentation, but I think it's definitely worth. That's one bit of advice I would say is look at investing. And I know the IPA report is said about doing some training. We're together at SIPS, our trade body. We've worked on some guides with the IPA, which actually, again, they mentioned at the end of the IPA report is top tips actually for marketing and agencies to work together. So we'll look at launching those in September 2020 to look out for those. But I think For me, it's the commerciality. So, you know, invest in understanding the client's business, and how to work with more senior people and be credible. And I think not have to go to a meeting, even if it is online. You know, be more deeper with your clients. I think, as opposed to, well, we're 10%, we're 10%, we're 10%. That's what, half a day a week, isn't it? So I think, knowledge, and, you know, we call it from procurement stakeholder management. You know, in terms of being able to deal with your internal stakeholders. That account managers are very good at dealing with a myriad of people. Perhaps be able to speak boardroom language is a different thing.
I echo this as well. It's all about having a relationship development strategy and also confidence. You know, I train account managers, account directors, and one of the things that keeps coming up is this lack of confidence. So there's no wonder that they're not having a dialogue at that level. And there's, you know, lots of factors involved in that. It's knowledge of the client's business, their industry, what's changing, trends, but also, and I'd love your view on this, is many account managers, account directors have this dual function. They're half kind of project managing the projects, and also half being expected to be the ambassador for the agency and develop and grow that piece of business, have that commercial point of view, and also look at what's changing the client side in terms of their business. And often it's conflicted because the project management side of their role, you know, they're inundated with just kind of getting stuff done, and it goes probably to the detriment of spending time understanding the client and nurturing the client and looking further ahead. So I don't know what your view is on that. I mean, from your perspective, I see lots of agencies with that dual role. Some agencies have the pure account management role and they have a separate project management function. What do you tend to see?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my preference, and that's what I do tend to see is separate roles, because I just don't think, I think they're very different. You know, one's externally focused, account management, one's internally focused, which is project management. And, you know, those project managements could be buyers actually as well, because sometimes they're sourcing third parties, but they're the ones, especially if you've got a huge delivery program for a client, you know, maybe across different markets, they play an exceptional role in doing it, you know, and those people do it really well. So I see, and I do prefer to have those two separate roles.
I think it makes total sense. Tina, this has been fantastic, really, really brilliant. I'm very conscious of your time. Just a couple of final things. I mean, what advice would you give for agency account managers? Anything that we haven't kind of covered in terms of what you would say you've witnessed that, you know, do more of this and less of that?
Probably have corporate engage with procurement. I think raise your profile. You know, if your trade body is doing a report about the role of account management, the rise or fall of account management, get out there, get on the speaker circuit. I think, you know, if people ask you to go and speak at a conference with a client or procurement, do it, because it helps. You know, to see good people and to see different people. You don't always want to hear from the same people, you know, when we do have conferences back. So I think raise your profile, you know, because so many of you are so good out there and doing a fantastic job. Just talk about it a bit more, probably, you know.
Brilliant, brilliant advice. I'm so glad we squeezed that bit in. Tina, where can people reach you, and who would you like to be contacted by if anyone hears for anything that you've said, which has been absolute gold, and they want to talk further with you?
Thank you, Jen. That's very kind. From my website, which is www.tinafegent.com. Just go on there and contact details. Jenny said I'm on LinkedIn a bit, sometimes on Twitter. I'm not in the mood for it at the moment. But yeah, and I'm happy, you know, I don't open the floodgates to loads of agencies, but I'm always happy to have an approach from an agency, and if I've got time, you know, have a chat, you know, because it's a hard market out there, I think. But, you know, I value the role of account management. I've enjoyed our chat, Jenny, and hopefully it's giving your listeners some perspective from the role of a procurement person.
It really, really has. It truly has. Thank you so much, Tina. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Jenny.